The crystal wine glass froze halfway to his lips when she spoke. Alexander Ward was a billionaire who'd asked the question as a joke, expecting embarrassment from the black waitress refilling his water. Instead, Naomi Rivers looked him dead in the eye and delivered an answer that shouldn't have been possible. She wasn't supposed to know about leverage positions or market corrections. She was supposed to serve coffee and disappear. But in that moment, as his business partners went silent, Alexander Ward realized he'd made a dangerous mistake. He'd underestimated someone who'd been preparing for years, waiting for an opportunity that should never have come. And now everything he'd built was about to change because of a woman the world had trained him to overlook. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The morning sun cast golden ribbons across the polished marble floors of the Meridian, a restaurant perched on the 42nd floor of the Sterling Tower. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline like an expensive painting, and the tables were set with crystal that caught the light just right. This wasn't the kind of place where people came to eat. It was where they came to be seen, to make deals that moved millions, to remind themselves and everyone else that they had arrived. Alexander Ward sat at his usual corner table, the one that gave him a view of both the entrance and the city below. At 42, he wore his wealth the way some men wore cologne, subtly but unmistakably. His tailored charcoal suit probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and his watch was the kind that whispered rather than shouted. He had the sort of face that belonged on magazine covers, sharp features softened just enough by a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Right now, that smile was fixed in place as he listened to two executives pitch him their latest idea. "The Henderson acquisition is solid, Alexander," said Marcus Blackwell, a heavy-set man whose enthusiasm always seemed just a touch desperate. "We're looking at a 30% return in the first quarter alone. 35 if we restructure their management," added Trevor Banks, younger and hungrier, leaning forward like a dog waiting for approval. Alexander took a slow sip of his coffee, letting them sweat. He'd learned years ago that silence was power, that making people wait for your response reminded them who held the cards. Truth was, he was bored. The deal was fine. The numbers worked. But everything lately felt like a script he'd already memorized, a game where he knew every move before anyone made it. That's when she appeared. Naomi Rivers moved between the tables with the kind of grace that came from years of reading a room. At 28, she had learned to make herself present enough to be helpful, but invisible enough not to intrude. Her uniform was crisp, her hair pulled back neatly, and her movements efficient. But it was her eyes that set her apart, calm, observant, intelligent. They didn't dart around nervously like so many of the other staff. They simply took things in. She approached Alexander's table with a silver coffee pot, her expression professionally pleasant. "Good morning, gentlemen. May I refill your cups?" Marcus barely glanced at her, too focused on impressing Alexander. Trevor nodded absently. Alexander waved a hand in what might have been permission or dismissal. He wasn't really paying attention. To him, she was part of the scenery, like the expensive art on the walls or the piano music drifting from the corner. Naomi poured smoothly, the coffee hitting each cup without a splash or drip. She'd done this thousands of times. Her hands were steady, even though her feet ached from the double shift she'd already worked. Even though her phone kept buzzing in her pocket with messages she was afraid to check. Even though her mother's medical bills were piling up faster than she could count them. She stepped back, ready to move to the next table, when Marcus suddenly laughed, too loud, too eager. "You know what, Alexander? Maybe we should ask her opinion." Marcus gestured toward Naomi with his coffee cup. "I bet she could explain that mess with your stock portfolio better than your analysts." Trevor snorted into his napkin. Both men grinned like they'd just told the funniest joke in the world. Naomi's hand tightened slightly on the coffee pot handle, but her face remained calm. She'd heard worse. In this job, you learn to let things roll off your back, to smile through condescension, to nod and walk away. She started to do exactly that. But Alexander leaned back in his chair, that practiced smile spreading wider. He was enjoying this. The boredom had lifted, replaced by the opportunity for entertainment. You know what? That's not a bad idea. He turned to face Naomi fully for the first time, his blue eyes sparkling with amusement. All right then, tell me, what should I do with a $200 million liquidity issue? The table went quiet. Marcus and Trevor exchanged glances, grinning, waiting for her to stammer or blush or excuse herself. The kind of moment that would give them something to laugh about later, something to remind them all of their place in the world. Naomi looked at Alexander, really looked at him. She saw the expensive suit, the casual arrogance, the way he held himself like someone who'd never been told no. She saw a man who thought this was a game. She could have walked away, should have walked away, but something about the way he said it, the sheer certainty that she'd be embarrassed, made something inside her go still and cold. Well, sir, she said, her voice steady and clear, the problem isn't liquidity. It's that you're heavily leveraged on a sector that's 3 months from a correction. The words hung in the air like smoke. Alexander's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. Marcus's smile faltered. Trevor stopped chewing. Naomi didn't flinch. She didn't look smug or defensive. She simply stood there, the coffee pot in her hand, her expression calm and composed. Informed. Alexander set his cup down slowly. His mind was racing. The tech sector, his largest holdings. He'd been worried about it for weeks, but his analysts kept telling him everything was fine. How did she? Excuse me? His voice came out sharper than he intended. You're over-leveraged in technology futures, Naomi continued, as if she were discussing the weather. The valuation bubble is unsustainable. When it corrects, and it will, your liquidity won't matter because your asset value will drop 40%. The silence that followed was deafening. Somewhere in the restaurant, silverware clinked against china. Piano music drifted through the air. But at Alexander's table, no one moved. Marcus's face had gone pale. Trevor's mouth hung slightly open. And Alexander felt something he hadn't felt in years. Genuine surprise. Not the pleasant kind you get from an unexpected gift. The uncomfortable kind that comes from being caught off guard, from realizing you'd underestimated someone so completely that you didn't even know you were doing it. Naomi nodded politely, collected an empty bread plate from the edge of the table, and turned to leave. Wait, Alexander started, but she was already walking away, moving to the next table with that same quiet confidence. It wasn't attitude. It wasn't defiance. It was something more unsettling than either. It was competence. Alexander stared after her, his mind churning. Marcus cleared his throat awkwardly. Trevor suddenly found his plate very interesting. Did she just? Marcus began. Yes, Alexander said quietly. She did. For the next 20 minutes, Alexander couldn't focus on the pitch. His mind kept circling back to those words. Heavily leveraged. Sector correction. 3 months. How did a waitress know about his portfolio? How did she know about market projections his own team hadn't fully explained to him yet? When the meeting finally ended and Marcus and Trevor left, subdued and confused, Alexander sat alone at his table. He pulled out his phone and opened his portfolio. The tech holdings glared back at him. 73 million in futures. High leverage. High risk. His analysts had called it aggressive but sound. But what if she was right? The question bothered him more than it should have. He wasn't used to doubting himself. He certainly wasn't used to being schooled by someone serving him coffee. Across the restaurant, Naomi disappeared into the back hallway. She pushed through the staff door into the break room, her professional mask finally slipping. Her phone buzzed again. She pulled it out with shaking hands. The message was from her younger sister, Kendra. Mom's test results came in. Call me ASAP. Naomi's stomach dropped. She leaned against the wall, closing her eyes. Her mother, Rosa, had been sick for months. The tests were supposed to tell them if the treatment was working. If it wasn't, she couldn't think about that right now. She had 4 more hours on her shift, then she had to pick up her mother's medication, then she had to study for her finance exam. The online course she was taking at night, the one she'd sacrificed everything for, the one that was supposed to be her ticket out of this endless cycle of bills and exhaustion. She took a deep breath, straightened her uniform, and headed back out to the floor. By the time the restaurant closed, Naomi's feet were screaming and her mind was numb. She was wiping down her last table when she noticed him. Alexander Ward, still sitting at his corner spot, waiting. Her heart sank. She'd hoped he'd forgotten about their earlier exchange, that it had been just another moment of wealthy boredom, already replaced by something else. But no, he was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Curiosity, maybe, or calculation. She straightened, picked up her tray, and walked over. Professional. Polite. Nothing more. Mr. Ward, we're closing soon. Can I get you anything else? Alexander gestured to the chair across from him. Seat. It wasn't a request. Naomi stayed standing. I still have cleaning to finish. I'll pay you for your time. He pulled out his wallet. Naomi's jaw tightened. I'm not for sale, sir. If you need something, I'm happy to help. But I'm not sitting down for money. Alexander blinked. Then, surprisingly, he put his wallet away. Fair enough. I apologize. That was crude. He paused. I wanted to ask you about what you said earlier. About my portfolio. I shouldn't have said anything. It wasn't my place. But you were right, weren't you? Naomi met his eyes. I don't know. I need to see the full breakdown to be sure. Where did you learn about market analysis? Books. Classes. Experience. You're a waitress. I'm a lot of things, Mr. Ward. Her voice was gentle but firm. Waitress pays my bill. Studying finance is what I do when I'm not working. And before you ask, yes, I know what I'm talking about. Alexander leaned back, studying her. This woman had just put him in his place twice in one day. Nobody did that. His board members didn't do that. His investors didn't do that. Hell, his own mother tiptoed around his ego. You're upset, he said. I'm tired, Naomi corrected. And I have another shift starting in 6 hours, so if there's nothing else. What if I wanted your perspective? Professionally. Naomi laughed, but there was no humor in it. It sounds like you're asking for entertainment, not advice. The words hit harder than she probably intended. Alexander's expression flickered. Something that might have been shame, quickly buried under defensiveness. I'm serious. Are you? Naomi set down her tray. Because from where I'm standing, this feels like a game. Rich man gets called out by the help, decides to see how far the joke goes. Maybe he throws her some money, gets a good story out of it. Everyone laughs. That's not, isn't it? Her eyes were steady, unflinching. You asked me a question to embarrass me. When I answered, you were surprised. Now you're curious. But curiosity isn't the same as respect, Mr. Ward. And I don't have time to be someone's novelty. With that, she picked up her tray and walked away. Alexander sat frozen. Her words echoed in his head, sharp and uncomfortable. Because she was right. He had been treating this like entertainment. A waitress who knew about finance was unusual, interesting, something to poke at. But the way she'd looked at him, like she could see right through him, that wasn't entertaining. That was humbling. He stood abruptly, threw some bills on the table, and left. On the drive home, his assistant called. Mr. Ward, I have a revised projections you requested. Actually, I need you to do something else, Alexander said slowly. Find out everything you can about Naomi Rivers. She works at the Meridian. Be discreet. There was a pause. Everything, sir. Background, education, family. I want to know who she is. Of course. May I ask why? Alexander stared out at the city, lights blurring past. Because she's either the smartest person I've met in years, or I'm losing my mind. Either way, I need to know. That night, Naomi returned to her apartment in a neighborhood where the buildings leaned tired against each other and the streetlights flickered. She climbed 3 flights of stairs, unlocked 2 deadbolts, and stepped into the small space she shared with her mother. Rosa Rivers lay on the couch, wrapped in blankets despite the warm evening. She was only 56, but illness had aged her. Her hair, once thick and dark, had thinned. Her skin had taken on a grayish pallor. Mama, Naomi said softly, kneeling beside her. Did you eat? A little. Rosa's smile was weak, but genuine. Kendra called. She said the doctor wants to see me next week. Naomi's heart clenched. That's good. We'll figure out the schedule. Baby, you're exhausted. You need to rest. I'm Fina. Naomi helped her mother sit up, adjusting the pillows. I'll make you some tea. Then I have a few hours of studying to do. You work too hard. Someone smart once told me that hard work is the only way out. Naomi kissed her mother's forehead. Wonder where I heard that. Rosa chuckled softly, then coughed. Naomi's smile faltered, but she kept moving. Thea. Medication. Check her mother's vitals. Then, and only then, did she allow herself to collapse at the small kitchen table with her laptop. She had 2 papers due and an exam coming up. Her online finance course was brutal, but she was top of her class. She taught herself most of it years ago, reading everything she could get her hands on, watching market trends, understanding patterns. When she'd finally scraped together enough money to enroll officially, the professor had been shocked at how much she already knew. But she'd had a dropout 2 years ago when her mother got sick. The bills had piled up too fast. Insurance covered some things, but not enough. Never enough. Now she was back, taking classes at night, fighting for every credit hour between shifts and caregiving and exhaustion. At midnight, her phone buzzed. An email. She almost ignored it, but something made her open it. It was from an anonymous sender. The subject line read, "Regarding your future." Naomi frowned and opened it. Inside was a single line, "Check your door." Her blood ran cold. She stood slowly, walked to the door, and peered through the peephole. Nothing. She opened the door carefully, chains still latched. An envelope lay on the mat. She grabbed it quickly, locked the door, and tore it open. Inside was a letter on expensive cream stationery. "Ms. Rivers, I would like to formally request your consulting services on a financial matter. Enclosed, you will find a contract and retainer agreement. Initial payment, $50,000. Meeting scheduled for 8 a.m. tomorrow at Ward Enterprises headquarters. I hope you'll consider this opportunity. Respectfully, Alexander Ward." Naomi's hands trembled. $50,000. That would cover her mother's treatment, her tuition, 6 months of rent. But it would also mean stepping into a world that had never wanted people like her. A world that saw her as a curiosity at best, a threat at worst. She looked at her mother, sleeping on the couch. She thought about the years of struggle, the nights of studying, the dreams she'd buried. Then she thought about Alexander Ward's smug smile. She wouldn't be anyone's joke. She wouldn't be a token. But maybe, just maybe, she could be something else. Something they didn't expect. The next morning, Naomi walked into Ward Enterprises headquarters wearing her best interview clothes, a simple black blazer and slacks she'd bought at a thrift store. The lobby was all marble and chrome, the kind of place designed to make you feel small. She didn't feel small. The receptionist looked her up and down, barely hiding her skepticism. "Name?" "Naomi Rivers. I have an appointment with Mr. Ward." The receptionist checked her computer, eyebrows rising. 43rd floor. "He's expecting you." The elevator ride felt endless. When the doors opened, a sleek assistant greeted her. "Ms. Rivers, this way." She was led to a massive office with windows overlooking the entire city. Alexander stood with his back to her, hands in his pockets. "Thank you for coming," he said without turning. Naomi pulled the contract from her bag. She'd covered it in red ink. "I've made some revisions." Now he turned, surprised. "Revisions?" "Yes. Your language was patronizing. You also offered standard consulting rates, which tells me you're not serious. And you included a non-disclosure agreement that's far too broad." She handed it to him. "If you want my help, these are my terms." Alexander took the contract, staring at her handwriting scrawled across his carefully prepared document. Nobody edited his contracts. Ever. A slow smile spread across his face. "You're serious." "I don't have time not to be." He read through her changes. She'd revised the payment structure, struck out the condescending clauses, and added clear boundaries about how she'd be treated. It was bold, audacious even. It was also exactly right. "All right," he said slowly. "I'll have my lawyer review these and get back to you by end of day. I'll need them by noon. I have a shift at 2. Alexander laughed, genuinely this time. "You drive a hard bargain. I know my worth, Mr. Ward. Question is, do you know yours?" That afternoon, with her revised contract signed and a check for $50,000 in her account, Naomi sat in a conference room at Ward Enterprises analyzing the acquisition Marcus and Trevor had pitched. Within 20 minutes, she'd found the problems. Within an hour, She documented them. Within 2 hours, she prepared a full report. Alexander read it in silence, his expression darkening with each page. Fraudulent valuations, inflated revenue cycles, forged client lists. If he'd bought Henderson Company, it would have cost him $40 million in losses. "How did you find this so fast?" he asked quietly. "Because I wasn't looking for what I wanted to see. I was looking for what was actually there." Alexander leaned back in his chair, genuinely shaken. His analysts had missed this. His lawyers had missed this. His entire team, people he paid millions, had missed this. But Naomi Rivers, a waitress taking night classes, had found it in under 2 hours. "How long have you been doing this?" he asked. "Since I was 16. My mom taught me to watch patterns, question assumptions. Everything else I taught myself." Alexander stared at her, really saw her for the first time. Not a novelty, not a joke, but a person with a gift, buried under circumstances that had nothing to do with her ability. "You just saved me $40 million. Naomi shrugged. "That's what you hired me for." "No," Alexander said slowly. "I hired you because I was curious. I'm keeping you because you're brilliant." For the first time, Naomi saw something in his eyes besides arrogance. Something that looked almost like respect. But respect was fragile. And she'd learned long ago that people like Alexander Ward didn't change overnight. Still, as she left his office that evening, a small part of her wondered if maybe, just maybe, this could be the beginning of something more than survival. She wouldn't let herself hope. Not yet. But she hadn't shut the door completely either. The corporate world of Ward Enterprises moved fast, but Naomi was learning to move faster. After proving herself with the Henderson Company analysis, she found herself pulled deeper into Alexander's business operations. What started as a single consulting job had evolved into something more substantial, though she still kept her shifts at the Meridian. Partly because she needed the stability, partly because she refused to depend entirely on a billionaire's whims. It had been 2 weeks since she'd signed that revised contract, and already her world looked different. The $50,000 retainer had paid for 3 months of her mother's treatment and cleared the most urgent bills. For the first time in years, Naomi could breathe without calculating costs in her head. But breathing room came with new pressures. She sat in a glass conference room on the 43rd floor, reviewing acquisition targets on a tablet Alexander had provided. Outside, the city sprawled beneath her like a game board. Inside, she was surrounded by documents that represented more money than she'd ever imagined touching. Alexander walked in without knocking. He never knocked, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He set one in front of her. "Triple shot, right?" Naomi glanced up, surprised. "You noticed. You drink it every morning at the Meridian. Figured you'd need it here, too." He sat across from her, loosening his tie. "What do you think of the Callaway merger?" Naomi turned the tablet toward him, showing her notes. "On the surface, it's perfect. Tech startup, innovative platform, strong user growth. Your board will love it. But their burn rate is astronomical. They're spending $4 for every dollar they make. The growth isn't organic, it's bought. And their primary revenue stream depends on a patent that expires in 18 months. Alexander's jaw tightened. "My team didn't mention that. Your team probably didn't dig deep enough. Or they did, and they're hoping you won't notice because they already promised someone they'd recommend approval." That's a serious accusation. It's a logical conclusion based on the timeline and the pressure I'm seeing. Naomi met his eyes steadily. "You asked for my perspective. I'm giving it. What you do with it is your choice." Alexander stood, pacing to the window. 3 weeks ago, he would have dismissed her observation as paranoia or inexperience. Now, he knew better. Every time he'd bet against her instincts, he'd been wrong. "I'm starting to think I've been surrounding myself with the wrong people," he said quietly. "You've been surrounding yourself with people who tell you what you want to hear. That's different from being wrong. It's just—" Naomi paused, choosing her words carefully. "It's just limited." He turned back to her, something shifting in his expression. "You don't do that. Tell me what I want to hear. Would you respect me if I did?" "No." The answer came immediately. "No, I wouldn't." A knock interrupted them. Alexander's assistant, Jennifer, poked her head in. "Mr. Ward, the board meeting starts in 10 minutes. They're asking if Ms. Rivers will be joining." Alexander looked at Naomi. Will you? Naomi's stomach tightened. She'd been dreading this. Reviewing documents in a private office was one thing. Sitting in a room with executives who saw her as an interloper was something else entirely. I thought I was just consulting on specific deals. You are. Callaway is on today's agenda. I want you there when we discuss it. Your board won't. I don't care what they want, Alexander said flatly. I care what I need. And I need someone in that room who isn't afraid to tell me the truth. Naomi gathered her materials, her heart pounding. She prepared for this intellectually, but emotionally? She was about to walk into a room full of people who would judge her before she opened her mouth. People who would see her background, her skin, her gender, and decide she didn't belong. But she'd faced worse. She'd faced poverty. She'd faced her mother's illness. She'd faced years of people underestimating her. She could face this too. The boardroom was exactly what she'd imagined. Long mahogany table, leather chairs, abstract art on the walls that probably cost more than her apartment building. 8 executives sat around the table, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile as she entered behind Alexander. Marcus Blackwell and Trevor Banks were there, the same men who'd laughed at her that day in the Meridian. Their faces went carefully neutral when they saw her, but she caught the flash of resentment in their eyes. At the head of the table sat Gerald Stanton, a silver-haired man in his 60s who carried himself like royalty. He'd been Alexander's mentor for over a decade, the man who'd helped build Ward Enterprises into what it was today. His gaze swept over Naomi with barely concealed disdain. Alexander, Stanton said smoothly, I wasn't aware we were bringing guests to board meetings. Naomi isn't a guest. She's a consultant I've hired for strategic analysis. Alexander pulled out a chair for her, the one right next to his own seat. She'll be presenting her findings on the Callaway merger. A woman at the far end of the table, Diane Fletcher, the CFO, frowned. We already have a full report on Callaway. Our team spent 3 months on due diligence. Then this should be quick, Alexander said mildly. Naomi, you have the floor. Every eye turned to her. The weight of their skepticism was almost physical. Naomi stood slowly, connecting her tablet to the display screen. Her hands wanted to shake. She didn't let them. Thank you for your time, she began, her voice steady. I've reviewed the Callaway acquisition proposal and identified several concerns that may not have been fully addressed in the initial assessment. For the next 15 minutes, she walked them through her analysis. The patent issues, the unsustainable burn rate, the artificially inflated user metrics, the dependency on venture capital that would dry up post-acquisition. She spoke clearly, backed every claim with data, and never once apologized for her conclusions. When she finished, silence filled the room. Then Diane spoke, her tone ice cold. That's an impressive presentation for someone with no formal credentials. But our analysts have decades of combined experience. Are you suggesting they all missed these issues? I'm suggesting that confirmation bias is real, Naomi replied calmly. When a deal looks good on paper and everyone wants it to succeed, it's easy to overlook warning signs. I'm not questioning anyone's competence. I'm offering a fresh perspective. A fresh perspective from a waitress, Stanton said softly. The words dropped like stones. Forgive me, Ms. Rivers, but what exactly qualifies you to advise a billion-dollar company? The question hung in the air. Naomi felt the familiar burn of being reduced to a single label, a single job, as if nothing else about her mattered. But before she could respond, Alexander's voice cut through the tension like a blade. What qualifies her is that she's saved this company over $40 million in the 3 weeks she's been here, which is more than I can say for some people at this table. Stanton's expression hardened. Alexander, I understand you're impressed by novelty, but bringing outsiders into sensitive negotiations. She's not an outsider. She's an asset. Alexander leaned forward. And unless someone can refute her analysis with actual data, not credentials or assumptions, I'm postponing the Callaway merger pending further review. The room erupted in murmurs. Marcus and Trevor exchanged glances. Diane's face flushed with anger. But Stanton just smiled, a thin, dangerous smile that made Naomi's skin prickle. Of course, Alexander. Whatever you think is best. He stood, gathering his materials. Though I hope you'll consider how this looks. To our partners, to our investors, to everyone who's worked so hard to build your reputation. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. As the executives filed out, several of them gave Naomi looks that ranged from curiosity to outright hostility. Only one person, a younger man named David Chun, nodded at her with what might have been respect. When the room cleared, Naomi sank in her chair, suddenly exhausted. "You did well," Alexander said. "They hate me. They're scared of you. There's a difference." He sat beside her, his expression serious. "I won't pretend this is going to be easy. Some of them have been with me for years. They're not used to being challenged, especially not by someone who looks like me." Alexander didn't deny it. "Especially not by someone who looks like you," he agreed quietly. "But that's their problem, not yours. You earned your place here." Naomi wanted to believe him, but she'd seen the way Stanton looked at her, the calculation in his eyes. She'd made an enemy today, maybe several. "I should get going," she said, checking her phone. "I have a shift in an hour." "You're still working at the Meridian?" "Until I know this is stable, yes." She gathered her things. "I've learned how to put all my eggs in one basket, especially baskets that belong to other people." Something flickered across Alexander's face. Hurt, maybe, or understanding. "Smart," he said finally. "But Naomi, you're not alone in this. If anyone tries to undermine you, I want to know about it." She nodded, not quite trusting herself to speak. Then she left, riding the elevator down 43 floors back to the world where she still poured coffee and cleared tables and pretended her feet didn't ache. That evening at the Meridian, Naomi moved through her shift on autopilot. Her mind kept replaying the board meeting, the hostility, Stanton's veiled threat. She was so distracted she almost missed the conversation happening at the table near the kitchen entrance. Two men in expensive suits, voices low but urgent. One of them was Marcus Blackwell. "Can't let this continue," Marcus was saying. "Ward is making decisions based on her advice now. Do you know how dangerous that is?" The other man, someone Naomi didn't recognize, shook his head. "What do you suggest?" "He clearly trusts her. Then we make sure that trust is misplaced. It wouldn't take much. A few errors in her analysis. Some compromised data. Make her look incompetent." Naomi's blood ran cold. She stood frozen behind a decorative pillar, her tray trembling in her hands. "That's risky," the other man said. "If Ward finds out, he won't. He'll just think he made a mistake hiring her, and we'll be there to pick up the pieces." They stood, still talking in low tones as they headed toward the exit. Naomi watched them go, her mind racing. They were planning to sabotage her, to plant false information and destroy her credibility. She needed to tell Alexander. But would he believe her? Or would it sound like paranoia, like she was looking for excuses before she'd even failed? The next morning, Naomi arrived at Ward Enterprises early, intending to warn Alexander about what she'd overheard. But before she could reach his office, Jennifer stopped her. "Ms. Rivers, Mr. Ward wants to see you immediately. He seems—" Jennifer hesitated. "He seems upset." Naomi's stomach dropped. She hurried to his office, finding him standing behind his desk, his face dark with anger. "What the hell is this?" He spun his laptop toward her. On the screen was her analysis of a tech company called Vertex Solutions. Except the numbers were wrong. Completely wrong. She'd recommended a heavy investment, but the data supporting it was nonsensical, contradictory. "I didn't write that," Naomi said immediately. "It's from your workstation. Your login. Your signature. Then someone accessed my account." She came around the desk, examining the document. "Alexander, look at this. These aren't even my writing patterns. The formatting is different. The analytical approach is completely—" "Stop." His voice was hard. "I defended you yesterday. I vouched for you. And now this. I'm telling you, someone is setting me up. Where you're in over your head and you're making excuses." The words hit like a slap. Naomi stepped back, her eyes stinging. "You don't believe me. I don't know what to believe. You're asking me to accept that people I've worked with for years are conspiring against someone I've known for 3 weeks." "Yes," Naomi said, her voice shaking but firm. "That's exactly what I'm asking. Because that's exactly what's happening." Alexander turned away from her, running a hand through his hair. She could see the war happening inside him. Trust versus doubt, instinct versus evidence. I need time to think, he said finally. Fine. Think. But while you're thinking, maybe ask yourself why this is so easy for you. Naomi's anger was rising now, burning through her hurt. You hire me for my mind. You said you valued my honesty. But the second things get complicated, you're ready to believe I'm incompetent. You're ready to believe I forged my own work just to what? Sabotage myself. That's not fair. None of this is fair. Her voice cracked. I've worked twice as hard for half the recognition my entire life. I've proven myself over and over. And it's still not enough. One mistake I didn't even make, and you're ready to throw me away. I'm not throwing you away. I'm asking for an explanation. And I gave you one. But you don't want an explanation. You want me to be wrong so you don't have to question the people you trust. She grabbed her bag. You know what? Figure out yourself. Because I'm done defending my competence to people who've already decided I don't belong. She walked out, past Jennifer's startled face, past the staring employees, into the elevator. Her vision blurred with angry tears. She'd been foolish to think this could work. Foolish to believe that talent and hard work could overcome the weight of prejudice and power. By the time she reached the ground floor, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We know about your mother. Stay quiet if you want to keep your job. Naomi stopped in the middle of the lobby, her hands shaking. They were threatening her. Not just her career, but her mother's care. The treatment Rosa desperately needed. The insurance that was keeping her alive. Fear flooded through her, cold and paralyzing. But beneath it, something else stirred. Something harder. Angrier. She'd spent her whole life being afraid. Afraid of poverty. Afraid of losing her mother. Afraid of reaching for something better and having it snatched away. She was tired of being afraid. That night, Naomi sat in her apartment with her laptop, tracing the origin of the falsified document. She wasn't a hacker, but she understood systems. She understood patterns. And she knew that people who tried to frame someone usually made mistakes. It took her 4 hours, 3 cups of coffee, and a video call with a former classmate who worked in IT security. But she found it. The document had been created on a workstation in the executive suite. Not her login, a remote access override. The kind that required administrator privileges. The kind that only senior executives had. She traced the IP address, matched it to the building's network logs, and found the timestamp. The document had been created during the board meeting, while she'd been presenting, which meant someone had planted it specifically to discredit her right after she'd challenged them. Marcus Blackwell's workstation, and the access code belonged to Gerald Stanton. Naomi sat back, her heart pounding. She had evidence. Real, documentable evidence. But showing it to Alexander meant accusing his mentor of sabotage. It meant forcing him to choose between her and the man who'd built his empire. Would he believe her this time? Or would this be the final excuse to get rid of her? Her phone buzzed again. Another text. Don't show up tomorrow, or we'll make sure your mother's care ends. Naomi stared at the message for a long time. Then she took a screenshot, backed up all her evidence to 3 separate drives, and made a decision. She was going to Ward Enterprises headquarters tomorrow, and she was going to fight. The next morning, Naomi walked through the glass doors of Ward Enterprises with her evidence printed and organized in a folder. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her hands were steady. She'd dressed carefully, a navy blazer she'd borrowed from her friend Sierra, slacks she'd pressed until they were crisp. Armor for battle. The receptionist looked startled to see her. Ms. Rivers, I don't think you're on the... I need to see Mr. Ward. Now. He's in a meeting. I'll wait. She sat in the lobby, ignoring the stares from passing employees. 30 minutes crawled by, then an hour. She refused to move, refused to leave, refused to be intimidated. Finally, Jennifer appeared, looking nervous. Ms. Rivers, Mr. Ward can see you for 5 minutes. But there's a board meeting immediately after. Perfect, Naomi said grimly. I'll need to speak to the board too. Jennifer's eyes widened, but she led Naomi to the elevator. As they rose through the building, Naomi reviewed her evidence one more time. The network logs, the timestamps, the access codes, everything she needed to prove what had been done to her. Alexander was alone in his office, his back to the door, staring out at the city. He didn't turn when she entered. "I'm sorry about yesterday," he said quietly. "I reacted badly." "Yes, you did." Naomi set her folder on his desk. "But that's not why I'm here." Now he turned, seeing her expression. "Naomi, someone altered files on my workstation. They used administrator access to create a false document and make it look like I wrote it." She opened the folder, spreading the evidence across his desk. "Here are the network logs showing the remote access. Here's the timestamp proving it happened during the board meeting. And here's the access code that was used." Alexander leaned over the documents, his expression darkening as he read. "This code belongs to Gerald Stanton." Naomi's voice was steady. "And the workstation that initiated the remote access belongs to Marcus Blackwell. They coordinated this. They planted evidence to make me look incompetent, and when that didn't work fast enough, they threatened me." She pulled out her phone, showing him the text messages. "They threatened my mother's medical care. They told me to stay quiet or they'd destroy me." Alexander's jaw clenched so hard she could see the muscle jumping. "When did you get these?" "Yesterday, after I left your office. And you came back anyway." "I'm not running from people who hide behind threats." Naomi met his eyes. "But I need to know something. If I show this to the board, if I expose what they did, will you back me? Or will you protect your mentor and your executives because it's easier than admitting they betrayed you?" The question hung between them, heavy with everything unsaid. Alexander looked at her for a long moment, and she saw something shift in his expression. The last remnants of doubt falling away. A decision being made. "I'll do more than back you," he said quietly. "I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what they did." 15 minutes later, Naomi walked into the boardroom for the second time. The same executives sat around the table: Marcus, Trevor, Diane, Stanton. They looked surprised to see her, then smug, clearly expecting her to have disappeared after yesterday's confrontation. "Gentlemen, ladies," Naomi said calmly, placing her folder on the table. "I'm here to discuss the discrepancies in yesterday's Vertex Solutions analysis." Stanton leaned back in his chair, that thin smile playing on his lips. "I think we've all seen enough, Ms. Rivers. Perhaps it's time to." "She's not finished." Alexander's voice cut through the room like steel. He stood at the head of the table, his expression cold and furious. "Let her speak." Naomi opened her folder. "Yesterday, a document was created using my login credentials. A document that contained deliberately falsified data designed to make me appear incompetent." She began distributing copies of her evidence. "Here's proof that the document was created remotely, using administrator access, during the board meeting when I couldn't possibly have been at my workstation." Marcus's face paled. Diane looked confused. Trevor started to speak, then thought better of it. "Furthermore," Naomi continued, her voice never wavering, "I received threatening text messages warning me not to expose this fraud. Messages that specifically mention my mother's medical care." She placed her phone on the table, the screenshots clearly visible. Stanton's smile vanished. "This is absurd. You could have sent those to yourself. You could have fabricated all of this. Could I have fabricated the network security logs?" Alexander pulled up the IT department's findings on the screen. "Because according to our own systems, someone using your executive access code remotely accessed Naomi's workstation at exactly 9:15 yesterday morning." "Care to explain that, Gerald?" The room went deathly silent. "And Marcus," Alexander continued, his voice dangerously quiet, "would you like to explain why the remote access originated from your workstation? Or why you were overheard at the Meridian discussing plans to sabotage Ms. Rivers' credibility?" Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. That's not. We were just discussing concerns. You were discussing how to plant false data and destroy someone's career because she had the audacity to be better at her job than you are at yours." Alexander's fury was controlled but absolute. "You sabotaged a colleague. You forged documents. You made threats against a woman's dying mother. And you did it to protect your own inadequacy." "Alexander, you're overreacting," Stanton began. "Am I?" Alexander slammed his hand on the table. "You've been my mentor for 12 years, Gerald. I trusted you. I built this company on the foundation you helped create. And you repay that trust by orchestrating a conspiracy against someone who's done nothing but tell me the truth. Stanton's mask finally cracked. That waitress has been here 3 weeks, and you're treating her like she's more valuable than people who've given you years. Because she is. The words came out flat, final. She saved us from a $40 million mistake. She identified fraud you all missed. And when you tried to destroy her for making you look bad, she didn't run. She came back with evidence. Alexander turned to Naomi. That's courage. That's integrity. That's what I need running this company. He turned back to the board. Effective immediately, Gerald Stanton is removed from the board. Marcus Blackwell and Trevor Banks are suspended pending a full investigation. If the IT audit confirms what I already know, that they orchestrated this sabotage, they'll be terminated and face legal action. The room erupted. Diane was demanding explanations. Other board members were shouting questions. But Alexander raised his hand, and somehow the chaos stilled. This company was built on innovation and integrity. Somewhere along the way, we forgot that. We started protecting territories instead of pursuing excellence. We started caring more about comfort than truth. He looked directly at Naomi. Ms. Rivers reminded me what we're supposed to be. And anyone who can't accept that is welcome to leave with Stanton. No one moved. Good, Alexander said. Meeting adjourned. Naomi, a word. The board filed out in stunned silence. Marcus and Trevor wouldn't meet her eyes. Stanton left last, giving her a look of pure venom. When they were alone, Naomi finally let herself exhale. Her legs felt weak. Her hand was shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Thank you, she said quietly. Don't thank me. You did this. Alexander's anger had faded, replaced by something softer. I'm sorry I doubted you yesterday. I should have trusted my instincts. I should have trusted you. You're human. Humans make mistakes. That's generous, considering I almost let them destroy you. Naomi smiled wearily. Almost only counts in horseshoes. Alexander laughed. A real laugh this time, not the practice charm he used in meetings. What now? Now? Naomi looked out at the city, at the world that had tried so hard to keep her out. Now I get back to work. We still have a company to run. We, Alexander repeated. I like the sound of that. As Naomi left his office, she felt something shift inside her. She'd walked into the lion's den and come out standing. She'd faced powerful men who wanted her gone and refused to break. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was fighting, and she was winning. But in the lobby, walking toward the elevators, she saw Stanton waiting. He didn't approach her directly, just stood there, watching. And in his eyes, she saw something that chilled her. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. She'd won the battle. But the war had just begun. After exposing the conspiracy, Naomi had hoped for a period of calm. Instead, she found herself navigating a different kind of storm. One where the enemies weren't as obvious and the threats came wrapped in polite corporate language. 3 days had passed since Stanton's removal from aboard. 3 days of whispered conversations that stopped when she entered rooms. 3 days of emails that seemed perfectly professional on the surface, but carried an edge of hostility underneath. The company had fractured into camps. Those who respected what she'd accomplished, and those who resented her for disrupting their comfortable hierarchy. Naomi sat at her new desk. Alexander had insisted she have proper office space, reviewing quarterly projections when her phone rang. The hospital. Her stomach clenched. Ms. Rivers? This is Karen from billing at Mercy General. I'm calling about your mother's account. Is something wrong? I made the payment last week. Yes, but there's been a complication. Her insurance provider is claiming the treatment plan wasn't pre-authorized. They're refusing to cover the next round of therapy. Naomi's vision blurred. That's impossible. We got authorization 3 months ago. I understand, but they're saying the authorization expired and needs to be renewed. Without it, the cost would be approximately $60,000 out of pocket. $60,000. The words echoed in her head. She'd spent most of the retainer on past bills and current treatment. She didn't have $60,000. I'll call them, Naomi managed. There has to be a mistake. But when she called the insurance company, she was transferred 6 times, put on hold for 40 minutes, and finally told that her case was under review and could take up to 6 weeks to resolve. 6 weeks her mother didn't have. Naomi ended the call and sat very still, that familiar feeling of helplessness creeping over her. Then her phone buzzed. A text from another unknown number. Enjoying your victory? It won't last. People like you don't belong in our world, and we'll make sure you remember that. She stared at the message, anger burning through her fear. They were still coming after her, still trying to break her. And now they were using her mother as a weapon. A knock on her door made her look up. Alexander stood there, 2 coffee cups in hand. He'd started doing that, bringing her coffee, checking in on her. Small gestures that felt bigger than they should. You look like you've seen a ghost, he said, setting a cup on her desk. Just bureaucracy. She forced a smile. The worst kind of ghost. He didn't buy it. Talk to me. Naomi hesitated, then told him about the insurance issue. She watched his expression darken as she spoke. This isn't coincidence, he said when she finished. Someone with connections made a call. Pulled strings to create this problem. You don't know that, don't I? Naomi, think about it. Stanton has been in this business for 40 years. He sits on 5 different boards. He knows people in every major company in this city, including insurance companies. Alexander pulled out his phone. Let me make some calls. No, the word came out sharper than she intended. I appreciate it, but I need to handle this myself. Why? Why does everything have to be a solo battle with you? Because the second I let someone else fight for me, I become dependent. And dependent people get used. She met his eyes. I've seen it happen. Hell, I've lived it. People offer help with strings attached, and before you know it, you're in debt to someone who owns you. I'm not trying to own you. I know, but I still need to do this myself. Alexander looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression stopped him. At least let me know if you need backup. That's not dependence. That's partnership. After he left, Naomi spent 3 hours on the phone with the insurance company, getting nowhere. Every representative had a different story. Every department pointed her to another department. It was bureaucratic warfare designed to exhaust her into giving up. She didn't give up, but by the time she left the office that evening, her head pounded and her heart felt heavy. At home, she found her mother asleep on the couch, her breathing shallow. Rosa had lost more weight in the past month. Her skin looked paper-thin. The treatments were helping, but slowly, and only if they continued. Naomi sat beside her, taking her mother's hand gently. Rosa stirred, opening her eyes. Baby, you're home late. Just work stuff? How are you feeling? Better. Rosa smiled, but Naomi could see the lie. Her mother had spent her whole life protecting her, pretending things were better than they were. Now Naomi was the one lying, pretending everything was under control when her world felt like it was crumbling. Mama, I need to tell you something. About the insurance? Kendra already told me. Rosa squeezed her hand weakly. Don't worry about it. We'll figure something out. I'm not going to let anything happen to you. I know, sweetheart, but promise me something. Rosa's eyes were serious now. Don't let them break you. Not the rich ones, not the powerful ones. You're stronger than all of them. Naomi felt tears threatening, but blinked them back. I'm trying. You're succeeding. You just don't see it yet. That night, Naomi barely slept. She kept running numbers in her head, trying to find a way to cover the costs. She could take a loan, but the interest rates would bury her. She could ask Alexander for an advance, but that felt too much like begging. She could. Her phone buzzed at 2 in the morning. Another text. Your mother's care ends unless you resign. You have 48 hours. Naomi sat up, her heart racing. They weren't just threatening anymore. They were giving deadlines, trying to force her hand. She looked at the message for a long time. Then she did something she'd never done before. She forwarded it to Alexander with a single line. They're escalating. His response came immediately, like he'd been awake too. My office. 7 Uhr morgens. We end this. The next morning, Naomi arrived at Ward Enterprises to find Alexander already there, along with 2 people she didn't recognize, a woman in a sharp suit and a man with a laptop. Naomi, this is Rebecca Lawrence, our head of security, and Thomas Park, our lead IT forensic specialist. Alexander's face was grim. I had them trace those text messages. All of them. Rebecca opened a folder. The messages came from burner phones, but they were purchased with a credit card registered to a shell corporation. That corporation's board includes 3 names you'll recognize: Gerald Stanton, Marcus Blackwell, and someone new, Richard Whitmore. Who's Richard Whitmore? He sits on the board of Heartfelt Insurance, Thomas said. The company handling your mother's coverage. Naomi felt the room tilt. They did this. They canceled her authorization. Not canceled, blocked. There's a flag in the system marking her case as high risk for fraud, which triggers automatic review holds. Thomas turned his laptop toward her. The flag was added 4 days ago by someone using Whitmore's administrative access. Can you prove it? Already have. Timestamps, IP addresses, access logs. Everything. Alexander stood, his anger barely contained. They're not just trying to force you out. They're trying to kill your mother through bureaucratic negligence. That's not corporate warfare. That's criminal. Naomi sank into a chair, the weight of it all pressing down on her. What do? We go to war, Rebecca said simply. We document everything, file criminal charges, and make sure everyone knows what they did. And your mother's treatment? Alexander added. I'm making some calls. Whitmore might have blocked one insurance company, but he doesn't control all of them. We'll get her coverage restored by end of day. Alexander, this isn't charity, Naomi. This is me protecting my people. You're my people now. He met her eyes. And I protect what's mine. The possessiveness in those words should have bothered her. Instead, it felt like safety, like someone finally had her back. Over the next 2 days, Alexander's legal team moved with precision. They gathered evidence, filed complaints, and contacted federal regulators about insurance fraud. Rebecca traced the burner phones to a store where security footage showed Marcus making the purchase. Thomas documented every illegal access to Naomi's files and her mother's insurance records. Meanwhile, Naomi returned to work with a new determination. If they wanted to destroy her, she'd show them exactly what she was made of. She dove into a complex merger analysis that had stumped Alexander's team for months. A potential acquisition of a struggling manufacturing company called Brennan Industries. The numbers didn't make sense. The company should have been profitable, but something was bleeding money. It took her 16 hours straight, 3 energy drinks, and a headache that felt like a vice grip. But she found it. Brennan wasn't struggling. They were being systematically embezzled by their own CFO, who'd hidden the theft behind a complex series of shell transactions. The company's value wasn't depressed. It was artificially suppressed, which meant it was actually worth 3 times what they were asking. When Naomi presented her findings to Alexander the next morning, he stared at the documents in silence. You found embezzlement. Almost $100 million over 5 years. Hidden in maintenance contracts that don't exist and supplier payments to companies that went bankrupt 3 years ago. If we acquire Brennan and expose this, we save a company, put a criminal in prison, and turn a $20 million investment into a $200 million asset. Naomi allowed herself a small smile. Not bad for a waitress. Alexander laughed, shaking his head in amazement. You're not a waitress. You're a force of nature. The next board meeting was scheduled for that afternoon. Word had spread about Naomi's Brennan discovery, and the energy in the building felt different. People nodded to her in hallways. Executives who'd ignored her before suddenly wanted to discuss strategy. Even Diane Fletcher, the CFO who'd questioned her credentials, stopped by her office. That Brennan analysis, Diane said without preamble. It's brilliant. I've been in this business 30 years, and I missed what you caught in 2 days. Different perspective, Naomi said carefully. No, better skills. Diane sat down uninvited. Look, I owe you an apology. When Alexander brought you in, I thought you were a pet project. Diversity window dressing. I was wrong. Thank you for saying that. Don't thank me yet. There are still people in this company who want you gone. They're quieter now, more careful, but they're still plotting. Diane leaned forward. Watch your back. And if you need allies, you've got at least one in me. After Diane left, Naomi felt something shift. She wasn't alone anymore. She had Alexander's protection, Rebecca's security expertise, and now Diane's respect. She was building something here, something real. But the text messages kept coming. Different numbers, same message. resign, or suffer. She stopped responding, stopped letting them see her fear. The afternoon board meeting began with tension so thick you could cut it. Marcus and Trevor were absent, still suspended. Stanton was gone, but 3 new faces sat at the table, and Naomi didn't recognize any of them. Alexander made introductions. Everyone, these are our new board members. Patricia Hamilton, former CEO of Silver Point Capital. Dr. James Morrison, economics professor at Stanford. And David Chun, whom many of you know from our investment division. David gave Naomi a subtle nod. She'd met him briefly. He was the only person who'd shown her respect during that first disastrous meeting. Before we begin regular business, Alexander continued, I want to address the elephant in the room. 3 former board members and 1 executive are currently under investigation for corporate sabotage, fraud, and criminal threats. The FBI is involved. This company will not tolerate corruption, harassment, or abuse of power at any level. He let that sink in before continuing. Now, I'd like Naomi Rivers to present her analysis of the Brennan Industries acquisition. For the next 30 minutes, Naomi walked them through her findings. The embezzlement, the hidden value, the potential return. She spoke clearly, backed every claim with evidence, and fielded questions with confidence. When she finished, Patricia Hamilton was the first to speak. This is exceptional work. If your analysis is correct, and I have no reason to doubt it is, this could be the deal of the decade. I'd like to propose we move forward immediately, Dr. Morrison added, before someone else discovers what Ms. Rivers found. The vote was unanimous. Naomi had just orchestrated a $200 million acquisition. After the meeting, as board members filed out congratulating her, Naomi felt a surge of pride. She'd done it. She'd earned their respect through sheer competence. But as she gathered her materials, her phone buzzed. Not a text this time, a call from Kendra. Naomi, where are you? I'm at work. What's wrong? It's Mama. She collapsed. We're at Mercy General. You need to come now. Naomi's world tilted. I'm on my way. She ran. Through the corridors, past the elevators because they were too slow, down 43 flights of stairs. She didn't remember the taxi ride or the hospital entrance. She just remembered bursting into the emergency room to find Kendra crying in the waiting area. What happened? She couldn't breathe. She was coughing up blood. They took her back 20 minutes ago. Kendra grabbed her hand. Naomi, they said something about her treatment being interrupted, that she missed critical doses. The insurance. The blocked authorization. The delay. This was her fault. She'd been so focused on fighting corporate battles that she'd lost track of what mattered most. I need to see her. They're still working on her. Naomi sank into a plastic chair, her hands shaking. Around her, the ER hummed with activity, nurses rushing past, machines beeping, someone crying in another room. But all she could think about was her mother, fighting for breath because Naomi hadn't been fast enough, smart enough, strong enough to protect her. Her phone buzzed. Alexander, where are you? We need to finalize the Brennan terms. She stared at the message, then turned off her phone. 2 hours later, a doctor emerged. Family of Rosa Rivers? Naomi and Kendra jumped up. Is she okay? She's stable for now, but her condition is critical. The interruption in her treatment caused significant complications. She needs immediate resumption of therapy, or the doctor's expression said what she couldn't. How much time does she have? Without treatment? Days, maybe a week. With treatment? She could have months, possibly longer. Start the treatment. Whatever it costs, start it. Ms. Rivers, I need to be honest with you. The authorization issues haven't been resolved. If we proceed without insurance coverage, you'll be responsible for approximately $80,000. $80,000. Naomi had maybe $12,000 in her account. She'd spent most of her retainer on past bills. She couldn't get a loan that fast. She couldn't. Do it anyway, she said. I'll figure out the money. After the doctor left, Kendra turned to her. How are you going to pay for this? I don't know, but I'll find a way. She turned her phone back on. 17 missed calls from Alexander. 6 from Rebecca. 4 from Diane. She ignored all of them and opened her banking app, trying to calculate how fast she could liquidate her meager assets. Then her phone rang again. Alexander. She answered this time. Where the hell are you? We've been trying to reach you for hours. My mother is in the hospital. Her voice came out flat, emotionless. She's dying because someone blocked her treatment to get back at me. Silence on the other end. Then, which hospital? Alexander, don't. Which hospital? Mercy General. But I don't need. I'm 10 minutes away. He hung up before she could argue. True to his word, Alexander arrived exactly 10 minutes later. He found Naomi in the waiting room, still in her work clothes, looking smaller than he'd ever seen her. How is she? Critical. They can treat her, but it costs $80,000 I don't have. Consider it handled. No. Naomi stood, anger flashing through her exhaustion. I told you, I don't want to owe you. You won't owe me anything. Your consulting work has saved this company over $300 million in the past month alone. Call this a performance bonus. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling the billing department. The cost will be paid within the hour. Alexander. Stop. His voice was gentle but firm. You've been fighting alone your entire life. You've been strong, resilient, independent. But Naomi, strength isn't refusing help. It's knowing when to accept it. He stepped closer. You don't work for me. We work together. And that means when you're drowning, I throw you a rope. Not because you're weak, but because that's what partners do. Tears finally broke through Naomi's defenses. She'd held it together through threats and sabotage and corporate warfare. But this simple act of someone caring without wanting anything in return shattered her. Alexander pulled her into a hug. She let herself lean into him for just a moment, let herself be held. Then she pulled back, wiping her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me. Just let me help. True to his word, the hospital called 30 minutes later. The bills were paid. Treatment would resume immediately. Rosa would have the care she needed. Naomi was finally allowed to see her mother an hour later. Rosa looked small in the hospital bed, tubes and monitors surrounding her. But she was breathing steadily, and her color looked better. Hey, Mama. Rosa's eyes fluttered open. Baby, you didn't have to come. Of course I did. Naomi took her hand carefully. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck, but I'll live. Rosa squeezed her fingers weakly. The nurse said someone paid my bills. That was your boss. It's complicated. He cares about you. I can tell. He cares about good employees. Naomi. Rosa's voice was soft but serious. I didn't raise a fool. That man didn't pay $80,000 because you're a good employee. He did it because you matter to him. Naomi wanted to argue, but the words stuck in her throat. Did she matter to Alexander? Beyond her analytical skills and strategic mind? She didn't know. Wasn't sure she wanted to know. Rest, Mama. We can talk about this later. Don't wait too long. Life is shorter than you think. Over the next few days, as Rosa stabilized and began recovering, Naomi threw herself back into work with renewed focus. Alexander had stood by her, had helped her without demanding anything in return. The least she could do was prove he'd made the right choice. The Brennan Industries deal closed ahead of schedule. Naomi's analysis had been perfect. The embezzlement was real, the CFO was arrested, and Ward Enterprises acquired a company worth triple what they'd paid. The board was ecstatic. Investors were calling it Alexander's smartest move in years. And everyone knew it was because of Naomi. She was no longer the waitress who got lucky. She was Naomi Rivers' strategic analyst, the woman who'd saved Ward Enterprises hundreds of millions and revolutionized how they evaluated acquisitions. But success bred new enemies. One morning, Naomi arrived at her office to find her door open. Inside, someone had ransacked her desk. Files were scattered. Her computer screen was cracked. And on her keyboard, a note. This is your last warning. She stood in the doorway, taking it all in. Then she pulled out her phone and called security. Rebecca arrived within minutes, her expression grim. This happened overnight. Security footage shows someone in a hood entering at 3 a.m. They knew where the cameras were, kept their face hidden. Professional, or someone with inside knowledge of our security system? Rebecca examined the note. We'll dust for prints, check access logs. But Naomi, this is getting dangerous. Whoever's behind this isn't playing corporate games anymore. What do you suggest? Personal security. At least until we identify the threat. You want to give me a bodyguard? I want to keep you alive. Rebecca's voice was sharp. These people have already shown they'll hurt your family. What makes you think they'll stop there? Naomi wanted to argue, but Rebecca was right. This had escalated beyond professional sabotage into something darker. When Alexander heard about the break-in, his reaction was swift and furious. He hired a private security firm, assigned Naomi a bodyguard named Marcus, a former Marine who took his job seriously, and increased building security across the board. This ends now, he told his legal team. I want every person connected to stand and investigate it. Every call, every email, every meeting. Find out who's still working with him. The investigation revealed something shocking. Stanton hadn't been working alone. He'd built a network of loyalists throughout the company. Executives, managers, even some board members who'd escaped the initial purge. They'd been coordinating through encrypted messages, planning their revenge against both Alexander and Naomi. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated how thoroughly Rebecca's team would investigate. Within a week, 5 more people were implicated. 3 executives, 2 board members. All of them quietly removed from their positions. All of them facing potential criminal charges. The company was in chaos. Departments were being restructured. New leadership was being installed. And through it all, Naomi worked tirelessly, helping Alexander navigate the transition while maintaining business operations. They fell into a rhythm. Late nights in the office, takeout dinners spread across conference tables, strategy sessions that blurred into personal conversations. Alexander told her about growing up privileged but lonely, about the pressure of inheriting his father's empire, about losing himself somewhere along the way. Naomi shared her own story. Poverty, resilience, her mother's strength, her dreams of something more. The walls between them, carefully maintained for weeks, began to crack. One night, working late on a particularly complex acquisition, Alexander looked up from his laptop. "Why finance?" he asked suddenly. "What? Why did you choose finance? Of all the things you could have studied, all the paths you could have taken, why this?" Naomi considered the question. Because numbers don't lie. People lie. Systems lie. But numbers? They tell you exactly what's happening if you know how to read them. And I wanted to understand how power really works. Money is power. Understanding money means understanding how to fight back. Fight back against what? Against people who think people like me don't deserve a seat at the table. She met his eyes. "You asked me that question as a joke, to embarrass me. But I answer because I refuse to be ashamed of what I know. I refuse to pretend I'm less than I am just to make other people comfortable." Alexander was quiet for a moment. "You've changed me, you know, the way I see everything. I used to think business was about dominance, about winning. But you've shown me it's about clarity, about truth, about having the courage to see things as they actually are, not as we want them to be. That's growth. It's more than growth. It's transformation." He stood, moving to the window. "Stanton was my mentor. I trusted him completely. Finding out he'd betrayed me, that he'd tried to destroy you to protect his own power, it made me question everything I'd built. But you didn't let that stop you. You chose truth over comfort. That matters. Only because you gave me no choice." He turned back to her, smiling slightly. "You're impossible to ignore, Naomi Rivers. Good. I've spent enough of my life being invisible." 2 weeks after the break-in, Rebecca's investigation finally bore fruit. The encrypted messages were traced back to their source. Not Stanton, but someone still inside the company. Someone with high-level access who'd been feeding information to Stanton's network, coordinating attacks, and planning the next move. When Rebecca revealed the name, Naomi felt her world tilt again. Richard Whitmore, the insurance board member. But he wasn't just connected to Stanton, he was Stanton's nephew. "He's been orchestrating everything from the inside," Rebecca explained. "The insurance blocks, the break-in, the threats. He has access through his board position and has been using it to sabotage you." "Can we prove it?" "We have messages, financial transfers, security footage from the break-in that partially shows his build and gait. It's circumstantial, but combined with the insurance fraud evidence, it's enough for criminal charges." Alexander's expression was granite. "Do it. File charges." and make sure everyone knows exactly what he did. The next morning, federal agents arrested Richard Whitmore at his office. The charges: conspiracy, corporate sabotage, insurance fraud, criminal threats, and tampering with medical care. The evidence was overwhelming, and within hours, news of his arrest spread through the business community like wildfire. Stanton's network collapsed. Without their inside source, without protection, the remaining conspirators scattered. Some resigned. Some came forward with information, hoping for reduced charges. The empire Stanton had built to destroy Naomi crumbled to dust. And Naomi stood at the center of it all, not as a victim, but as the catalyst for exposure. The woman who'd refused to break, who'd fought back with evidence and truth instead of surrendering to fear. In the aftermath, Alexander called an emergency board meeting. The room was different now. New faces, new energy. The old guard was gone, replaced by people who valued competence over connections. "I want to make an announcement," Alexander began. "Naomi Rivers has been instrumental in saving this company. Her analysis, her integrity, her courage. She represents everything we should be. Effective immediately, I'm promoting her to Chief Strategic Advisor, with full authority over all major acquisitions and investments." The room erupted in applause. Real applause, not the polite corporate kind. Patricia Hamilton was smiling. David Chun was nodding. Even Diane looked genuinely pleased. Naomi stood, feeling the weight of their respect. She'd come into this building as a waitress people mocked. Now she was walking out as an executive people trusted. "Thank you," she said simply. "I won't let you down." Later, as she left the building, she found Alexander waiting by his car. "Need a ride?" "I was going to take the train." "Humor me." They drove in comfortable silence for a while before Alexander spoke. "You did it. You changed everything. We did it. Together." "Together," he agreed. "I like the sound of that." Naomi looked out at the city passing by, the same city she'd struggled in, fought in, survived in. It looked different now. Not because it had changed, but because she had. She'd walked into that restaurant as someone people overlooked. She was leaving as someone people couldn't ignore. And this, she thought, was only the beginning. The transformation of Ward Enterprises happened gradually, then all at once. With Naomi as Chief Strategic Advisor, the company shifted from reactive to proactive, from cautious to confident. But more than strategy changed. The culture itself began to evolve. Naomi stood in the main conference room addressing a group of junior analysts, something she'd started doing weekly. Her mother's health had stabilized over the past 3 weeks, and with that burden lifted, Naomi had thrown herself into reshaping how the company operated. "Don't just look at the numbers," she was saying. "Look at what creates the numbers. A company's financial statement tells you where they are, but their internal culture, their supply chains, their employee retention, that tells you where they're going." A young analyst named Sophie raised her hand. "Ms. Rivers, how do you evaluate culture from outside?" "Talk to people, not the executives. They'll give you rehearsed answers. Talk to mid-level employees. Check Glassdoor reviews. Look at turnover rates in key departments. Culture leaks into everything." Naomi pulled up a slide. "Take Henderson Company, the one we almost acquired. Beautiful financials, but 70% management turnover in 2 years. That's not normal transition. That's a sinking ship, and the rats knew it first." The analysts laughed, scribbling notes. Naomi felt a surge of satisfaction. This was what she'd dreamed of, not just having a seat at the table, but changing who else got to sit there. She'd already pushed Alexander to expand their recruitment beyond Ivy League schools, to consider candidates from state universities and community colleges. People like her, who had the talent but not the pedigree. After the session, she returned to her office to find a surprise waiting. Her mother, walking slowly with a cane, but walking nonetheless, stood admiring the view from Naomi's windows. "Mama, what are you doing here?" Rosa turned, her smile bright despite her obvious fatigue. "Kendra drove me. I wanted to see where my daughter works, where she's changing the world." Naomi hugged her carefully, mindful of her mother's fragility. "You should be resting." "I've been resting for weeks. I needed to see this." Rosa gestured at the office, the city view, the plaque on Naomi's desk that read Chief Strategic Advisor. I needed to see what you built. We're still building it. No, baby. You already built it. This right here, this is the foundation. Everything else is just construction. Rosa squeezed her hand. I'm proud of you. Your father would be too. Naomi's throat tightened. Her father had died when she was 12, before he could see any of this. But she liked to think he'd known somehow, even then, that his daughter would be extraordinary. Come on, Naomi said. Let me give you the tour. Then we're getting lunch, and you're going to tell me everything the doctor said at your checkup. As they walked through the building, employees greeted Naomi with genuine warmth. Not the forced politeness of subordinates, but the respect of colleagues. She'd earned her place here through competence and integrity, and everyone knew it. They were heading to the elevator when Alexander intercepted them. Mrs. Rivers, it's wonderful to see you up and around. Mr. Ward, thank you again for everything you did for me. For us. Please call me Alexander. And you don't need to thank me. Your daughter has made this company more money than I could ever repay. He smiled at Naomi. Though I keep trying. Rosa studied him with a mother's knowing eyes. You care about her. I can see it. Alexander's composure faltered slightly. Ah, yes. Naomi is invaluable to this organization. That's not what I said. Rosa's voice was gentle but pointed. I said you care about her. Not her work. Her. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Naomi felt her cheeks warm. Mama, we should get going. You're right, Alexander said quietly. I do care about her. More than I probably should, given our professional relationship. But I'm not the kind of man who apologizes for recognizing when someone extraordinary walks into his life. Rosa smiled, satisfied. Good. Because my daughter doesn't need someone who apologizes for seeing her worth. She needs someone who celebrates it. After they left, Naomi couldn't shake her mother's words. Did Alexander care about her beyond work? And more importantly, how did she feel about him? The lines had blurred somewhere between late-night strategy sessions and shared Chinese takeout, between him paying her mother's medical bills and her saving his company from disaster. But she couldn't afford distraction. Not now, when everything was finally falling into place. The next major test came 2 weeks later. Ward Enterprises was bidding on a massive infrastructure contract, a project that could define the company's next decade. The competition was fierce, including several firms with deeper pockets and longer track records. Naomi spent 70 hours preparing their proposal. She didn't just pitch numbers, she told story. She showed how Ward Enterprises had transformed under new leadership, how their commitment to integrity and innovation made them the safest bet. She highlighted their recent successes, their expanded team, their forward-thinking approach. The presentation to the contract committee took 4 hours. Alexander delivered the opening and closing, but Naomi handled the substance, the analysis, the projections, the risk assessments. She answered every question with precision, anticipated objections before they were raised, and made their competitors look like amateurs. When they left the building, Alexander was grinning. That was the best pitch I've ever seen. We'll find out if it was good enough in 2 weeks. It was good enough. Trust me. He paused by his car. Dinner? To celebrate. We don't know if we won yet. We're celebrating you, not the contract. Though I'm confident we got that too. Naomi hesitated. Dinner felt different than working late together. It felt like crossing a line. But maybe that line was already crossed, had been crossed the moment he'd shown up at the hospital and paid her mother's bills without asking for anything in return. Okay, she said, but somewhere low-key. I've had enough corporate atmospheres for one day. They ended up at a small Italian place in Naomi's neighborhood, the kind of restaurant where the owner knew half the customers by name. It was worlds away from the Meridian, and Naomi could see Alexander relaxing in ways he never did in his usual environment. This is nice, he said, looking around. Real. This is my world. Or it was before Ward Enterprises. Do you miss it? The simplicity? Naomi considered the question. Sometimes. But I don't miss the struggle, the fear, wondering how I'd pay next month's bills or if my mom would get the care she needed. She met his eyes. You gave me security. Not just money, but the chance to use my mind without constantly fighting for survival. That's worth more than you know. You gave me something too. Perspective. Purpose. You reminded me why I built this company in the first place. Not to accumulate wealth, but to do something that mattered. Alexander reached across the table, hesitated, then took her hand. Naomi, I know this is complicated. The power dynamics, the professional implications. But I need you to know, what I feel for you isn't about work. It's not about gratitude or admiration for your skills. It's about you. The woman who walked into my life and refused to be intimidated. Who stood up to bullies and threats and kept fighting. Who cares about justice and truth more than money or status. You've changed me in ways I didn't know I needed to change. Naomi's heart pounded. She should pull her hand away. Should maintain professional distance. Should protect herself from the vulnerability of letting someone in. Instead, she squeezed his hand gently. I feel it too. But Alexander, I'm scared. Everything in my life has taught me that depending on powerful people leads to pain. That the second you need someone, they use it against you. I'm not those people. I know. But fear doesn't care about logic. She took a shaky breath. Can we go slow? Figure this out without rushing? As slow as you need. I'm not going anywhere. The contract decision came a week later. Ward Enterprises won. The project was worth $800 million over 5 years. The biggest deal in the company's history. The board was ecstatic. Investors were calling it a triumph. And everyone knew Naomi's presentation had sealed it. But with success came new dangers. Gerald Stanton, who'd been quiet since his removal, suddenly resurfaced with a vengeance. The attack came through the media. A press conference where Stanton, flanked by lawyers, made explosive allegations. He claimed Alexander had used insider information obtained through unauthorized sources, meaning Naomi. He claimed the company's recent success was built on corporate espionage and fraud. He claimed Naomi was a plant, someone with a criminal background who'd infiltrated Ward Enterprises to steal secrets. Every word was a lie, but lies told confidently to cameras had power. The story exploded. Financial news outlets ran headlines questioning Ward Enterprises' ethics. Investors called, demanding explanations. The stock price dropped 15% in a single day. Naomi watched the press conference from her office, her blood running cold. Stanton was trying to destroy everything she'd built, using her as the weapon. Alexander stormed into her office moments later. This is slander. We're suing him into oblivion. That won't stop the damage. People believe what they want to believe, and right now, the story is too juicy to ignore. Naomi stood, her mind racing. We need to get ahead of this. Control the narrative. Ow! The same way we beat them before. With truth. She pulled out her phone. I'm calling a press conference. Tomorrow, I'll present every piece of evidence showing exactly what Stanton and his network did. The sabotage, the threats, the criminal charges. Everything. Naomi, if you go public like that, you'll be putting yourself in the spotlight. Every detail of your life will be scrutinized. Let them scrutinize. I have nothing to hide. Her voice was steel. Stanton wants to make me the villain? Fine. I'll show everyone exactly who the real villain is. The press conference was scheduled for the next morning. Naomi spent the entire night preparing, reviewing evidence, crafting her statement. Alexander wanted to stand beside her, but she refused. This is my fight. I need to do this alone. You're never alone. Not anymore. His words gave her strength, but she knew he was right. This had to be her moment. Her voice. The conference room was packed with reporters, cameras, and skeptical faces. Naomi stood at the podium in a Navy suit, her mother's words echoing in her mind. Don't let them break you. Thank you for coming, she began, her voice steady. My name is Naomi Rivers. For months ago, I was a waitress at the Meridian restaurant, working double shifts to pay my mother's medical bills while studying finance at night. Today, I'm the chief strategic advisor at Ward Enterprises. Some people think that journey is suspicious. I'm here to explain exactly how it happened. For the next 40 minutes, she told her story, not with defensiveness or anger, but with calm precision. She explained how Alexander had asked her for advice as a joke, how she'd given him an answer that proved correct, how she'd been hired, then sabotaged, then threatened. She presented evidence of every crime committed against her, the falsified documents, the insurance fraud, the break-in, the threats. She named names: Stanton, Whitmore, Marcus, Trevor. These men didn't target me because I was incompetent, she said. They targeted me because I was good at my job, because I exposed their corruption, because I didn't fit their idea of who deserves power in corporate America. She pulled up a slide showing Ward Enterprises' performance before and after her involvement. Since I became Chief Strategic Advisor, we've avoided $400 million in losses, secured $800 million in new contracts, and increased company value by 32%. Those aren't the numbers of someone committing fraud. Those are the numbers of someone doing their job exceptionally well. She paused, letting the data speak. Gerald Stanton is a man who built his career on connections and intimidation. When someone challenged his authority with competence instead of fear, he tried to destroy them. The criminal charges against him and his associates aren't allegations. They're documented facts. The FBI has the evidence. The courts will decide his fate. A reporter raised her hand. Ms. Rivers, critics say you've benefited from a personal relationship with Alexander Ward. How do you respond to accusations of favoritism? Naomi had expected this. Alexander Ward hired me because I saved his company $40 million with a single analysis. He promoted me because I continued delivering results. If that's favoritism, then I hope every company in America adopts the same policy, promoting people based on competence rather than connections. She leaned into the microphone. As for a personal relationship, that's between two adults and has no bearing on my professional capabilities. Next question. Another reporter stood. What do you say to people who claim you don't have the credentials for your position? I say that credentials matter less than results. I say that some of the most destructive financial decisions in history were made by people with impeccable credentials. I say that intelligence, integrity, and hard work should count for more than where you went to school or who your parents knew. She smiled slightly. And I say that if my work isn't enough proof of my qualifications, then no amount of degrees would satisfy those critics anyway. The questions continued for another hour. Some hostile, some genuinely curious. Naomi handled each with grace and confidence. By the end, even the skeptical reporters looked impressed. When she finished, she didn't wait for feedback. She simply walked out, exhausted but unbowed. Alexander was waiting outside the room. You were magnificent. We'll see. The narrative doesn't change overnight. But it did change. Within hours, social media exploded with support for Naomi. Journalists who'd been skeptical started digging into Stanton's history, finding pattern after pattern of corruption and abuse. Other women came forward with stories of how Stanton had sabotaged their careers when they'd threatened his power. The story shifted from mysterious waitress infiltrates corporation to brilliant woman overcomes systemic corruption. Major news outlets ran pieces about Naomi's journey, her intelligence, her resilience. She became a symbol, not just of personal success, but of what was possible when talent was given a chance. 3 days after the press conference, federal prosecutors announced expanded charges against Gerald Stanton. Securities fraud, conspiracy, witness tampering. The evidence was overwhelming, much of it provided by Naomi's meticulous documentation. His empire collapsed, his reputation destroyed, his legacy reduced to a cautionary tale about the dangers of prioritizing power over integrity. 2 weeks later, Ward Enterprises held a celebratory dinner for the infrastructure contract win. The event was at the Meridian, Naomi's idea, a way to come full circle. She walked into the restaurant wearing an elegant black dress, her mother on one arm and Alexander on the other. The staff she'd once worked beside stared in amazement. Some looked proud, others looked inspired. The maitre d', who'd barely noticed her when she'd been a waitress, rushed over with fawning attention. Ms. Rivers, what an honor to have you here tonight. Naomi smiled politely, but couldn't help feeling the irony. The same people who'd overlooked her now treated her like royalty, not because she'd changed, but because her title had. The dinner was everything a victory celebration should be. Toasts were made. Success was acknowledged. The board members who doubted her now sang her praises. Patricia Hamilton even pulled her aside. You've done something remarkable here, Patricia said. Not just saving the company, but transforming it. You've shown that diversity isn't about checking boxes. It's about bringing in perspectives that actually make us better. Later, as dinner wound down, Alexander stood to speak. I want to thank everyone who contributed to our success this quarter. But especially, I want to acknowledge Naomi Rivers. He looked directly at her. 4 months ago, I asked her for financial advice as a joke. I thought I was being clever, entertaining myself at her expense. Instead, she gave me an answer that changed everything. She saved this company hundreds of millions of dollars. She's exposed corruption that was rotting us from the inside. And she's reminded all of us what real leadership looks like. Not titles or connections, but courage, integrity, and relentless competence. He raised his glass. To Naomi Rivers, the woman who refused to be underestimated. The room erupted in applause. Genuine, heartfelt applause. Naomi felt tears threatening, but kept her composure. She stood, accepting the acknowledgement with grace. As people mingled after dinner, Naomi found herself back near the window where she'd once poured Alexander's coffee. The view looked the same, but everything else had changed. Her mother appeared beside her. How does it feel? Surreal. Like I'm standing in someone else's life. You're standing in exactly the life you built. The one you earned. Rosa squeezed her shoulder. I won't be around forever, baby. But I'll die knowing my daughter changed the world. That's more than most mothers get. Don't talk like that. You're getting better. I am. Thanks to you. Thanks to Alexander. Thanks to the life you've created that gave us options. Rosa smiled. Promise me something. Don't close yourself off to happiness. Don't let fear stop you from accepting love when it's real. Naomi knew she was talking about Alexander. It's complicated. Love always is. But complicated doesn't mean impossible. Rosa kissed her cheek. Think about it. As the evening ended, Alexander offered to drive Naomi and her mother home. In the car, Rosa fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the excitement. Naomi watched the city lights blur past, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. Thank you, she said quietly. For tonight. For everything. You earned every moment of it. Still, you didn't have to fight for me the way you did. You could have protected yourself, your company, by cutting me loose when things got hard. That was never an option. Alexander's voice was soft but firm. Naomi, I meant what I said at dinner. You changed everything. Not just the company, but me. You made me want to be better, to deserve the trust you placed in me. I didn't place trust easily. I know. That's why it meant so much when you did. They pulled up to Naomi's apartment building. Alexander helped Rosa inside, then walked Naomi back down to the lobby. What happens now? Naomi asked. We've defeated the enemies, won the contracts, transformed the company. What's left? Everything. Alexander smiled. We build something that lasts. We create opportunities for people like you, talented, brilliant people who just need someone to take a chance on them. We prove that companies can be successful and ethical. We change the system from the inside. That's ambitious. So are you. He reached for her hand. And maybe, if you're willing, we figure out what this is between us. Without the pressure of corporate warfare or survival. Just two people who care about each other, taking it slow like you said, seeing where it goes. Naomi looked at their joined hands, at his hopeful expression, at the future stretching out before them. For the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of what came next. Okay, she said softly. Let's see where it goes. He kissed her forehead gently, a promise of patience and possibility. Then he left, and Naomi climbed the stairs to her apartment. The same apartment where she'd cried in desperation, where she'd studied until exhaustion, where she'd wondered if she'd ever escape the cycle of struggle. Now that apartment felt different. Not smaller or lesser, but like a reminder of how far she'd come, how much she'd overcome, how impossible dreams could become reality with enough determination, intelligence, and courage. She checked on her mother, who was sleeping peacefully, then stood at her window looking at the city. Somewhere out there, other women were fighting the same battle she'd fought. Other talented people were being overlooked, underestimated, dismissed. She couldn't save all of them, but she could create a path, could prove it was possible, could use her position to open doors that had been closed. The next morning, Naomi arrived at Ward Enterprises with a new proposal for Alexander: a mentorship program for women and minorities in finance, scholarships for community college students, a recruitment pipeline that looked beyond traditional hiring pools. "This is ambitious," Alexander said, reading through her plans. "It'll require significant investment. It'll also create a talent pipeline that gives us access to brilliant people our competitors overlook. It's good business and the right thing to do." "Then let's do it." He signed the approval without hesitation. "The Naomi Rivers Fellowship Program has a nice ring to it. Don't name it after me." "Why not? You're the one who proved it's possible. Let other people see themselves in your success." Over the next months, the program launched. Applications flooded in from young people who saw in Naomi's story a reflection of their own struggles and dreams. The first class of fellows arrived, 15 brilliant students from diverse backgrounds, hungry for opportunity. Naomi threw herself into mentoring them, sharing everything she'd learned, not just about finance, but about resilience, about refusing to shrink, about turning obstacles into opportunities. The company flourished. The infrastructure project exceeded expectations. New contracts followed. Ward Enterprises became known not just for profitability, but for integrity and innovation. And Naomi? She became the face of a new kind of success, one built on competence rather than connections, on courage rather than conformity. Speaking invitations arrived, magazine profiles, requests to serve on boards. She accepted some, declined others, always staying focused on the work that mattered. Her relationship with Alexander deepened slowly, carefully. Dinner dates became regular. Stolen moments in between meetings. Late-night conversations about dreams and fears. It wasn't perfect, corporate relationships never were, but it was real, built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection. Rose's health continued to improve. Not back to normal, but stable, manageable. She'd regained enough strength to attend Naomi's speaking engagements, sitting in the front row with tears of pride. One evening, exactly 6 months after that first day at the Meridian, Naomi stood in her office looking at the city. Her city, the one she'd conquered not through luck or connections, but through sheer determination and brilliance. Alexander appeared in her doorway. "Ready to go home?" "Almost." She gestured to the view. "I was just remembering. 6 months ago, I was pouring your coffee and dodging condescension. Now I'm running strategy for a billion-dollar company and mentoring the next generation of leaders. It's almost too much to believe." "Believe it. You earned every bit of it. We earned it. Together." She turned to face him. "You took a chance on me when you didn't have to. You believed in me when everyone said you shouldn't. That matters. You're the one who turned that chance into something extraordinary." He crossed her, pulling her close. "I asked you for advice as a joke. You gave me wisdom that changed my life. Fair trade, I'd say." Naomi laughed, resting her head against his chest. "The best jokes are the ones that turn out not to be jokes at all. Is that what we are? A joke that became something real? No, we're proof that extraordinary things happen when you're brave enough to see people for who they really are, not who you expect them to be." Outside, the city glowed with possibility. Inside, Naomi Rivers stood in the life she'd built, not handed to her, not given by chance, but earned through intelligence, courage, and an unshakable refusal to accept that she didn't belong. She'd walked into that restaurant as a waitress people overlooked. She was walking out as a woman people couldn't ignore. And somewhere out there, another young woman was just beginning her journey, carrying dreams that seemed impossible. When that woman felt like giving up, she'd hear Naomi's story. She'd see what was possible, and she'd keep fighting, because that's what change looked like. Not one dramatic moment, but thousands of small victories. Not one extraordinary person, but many ordinary people refusing to accept limitations. Naomi had started a revolution with a single sentence of financial advice. Now she was building an empire of opportunity, one mentee at a time. The billionaire had asked her for advice as a joke. Her answer had shocked him, changed him, and ultimately transformed them both. Turns out, the joke was on anyone who'd ever underestimated Naomi Rivers. And she was just getting started. If you enjoyed this story of courage, resilience, and unexpected triumph, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that challenge everything you thought you knew about power, success, and who deserves a seat at the table.